What's going on, everyone? Tanner Poppitt here at Madrost and Poppitt's Corner. And if you are looking for the best in physical media, make sure to go check out Bionic Records in Cypress, California. They have been in operation since 1988 and offer a wide variety of musical styles, whether it be punk, jazz, metal, rock, anything your heart desires. Go check out Bionic Records in Cypress, California. Go hit up Mike. Heck, tell him I sent you. Bionic Records, Cypress, California. Welcome, everyone. Welcome. Another episode of Poppitt's Corner, episode 73. And we are going all the way to Chicago, the pretty much, unfortunately, the murder capital of the world. But we won't get into any of that stuff. We're going to go shift gears here, a little bit more positive aspect. And we're going to bring on my man, Mr. Jon Macak. How you doing today, sir? Thanks so much for coming on.
Hey, Tanner, thanks for having me on. It's good to be talking to you. I got to say, murder capital of the world, and I have committed none of them, so I'm very proud of that. Okay.
Well, dude, it's been a while since pretty much anyone's heard from you. I mean, you were a prominent figure and still are a prominent figure in music, and just in a different light. And we'll get to it. But you know, it's great to hear your voice, and thank you very much again for giving me this opportunity to discuss your history and your journey, and just educate the fans of Diamond Plate and everything that you've done since. So I really just appreciate you.
Hey, no worries, man. Like I said, I'm glad to be talking to you, and it'll be nice to talk about some stuff that maybe I never really talked about publicly a whole lot, and have people hear what I have to say, and hopefully gain some perspective or learn some stuff from you. That'd be great.
Absolutely, man. Well, hey, so talk to me about the first time you heard music and kind of what was the band for you?
That's interesting. It's weird because I can't point to like any one moment, but I do have an image like of a scene in my head from when I was like 5 or 6. I have some older brothers who are, like 10, 12 years older than me. So it's a pretty big gap. And I was very young, obviously. I remember being around them and hearing like heavier music, and they liked it. So I thought it was cool automatically because my older brothers liked it. And I didn't know what any of the bands were called. I just knew like certain songs that I heard. So for the longest time, they would just be in my memory as like, oh, that one song I heard when I was a kid. And then as I got older and I was able to put names and faces to those songs, it turned out that a lot of it was like a lot of Metallica songs, stuff like that. So I loved Metallica before I even knew they were Metallica, really. And as I got older, that became kind of the band that really got me into wanting to play. And that's the one band that, I know all of their catalog and the ins and outs of what they do. That was the band that kind of started all of that for me, for sure. And, we all branch out from there, but that's the one that I always go back to for that.
Now why? What about Metallica kind of did it for you? And what was the album that you were particularly just mesmerized by?
It's crazy because, like I said, when I first was hearing it, I was so young that I didn't understand any of what was going on, and I couldn't articulate why I liked it, but it was just cool. And it was just like that. I would, if I had to put words to it now, I guess I would say, listening to an album like Master of Puppets, how high energy it is, and like how perfectly they blended like the riff heavy element of songwriting, but also just writing really good songs that happen to have really heavy riffs. It's a very difficult balance to strike, as I'm sure you understand. They're among the best to ever do that, in my opinion. So that's what I always come back to with them.
So because they were able to not just infuse heaviness, but melodicism into their music too, which I really like. And dynamics, they added a bunch of cleans, and just even bass parts were melodic. So there's a lot of melodicism on specifically that era and that album of their career.
Oh, absolutely. And it's easy nowadays. Like if a lot of people who like heavier stuff than Metallica might want to poke fun at them, and you can call them sellouts or whatever you want to say. But ultimately, the balance that they were able to strike in their career of writing stuff that is heavy, stuff that is melodic, stuff that, like you said, has dynamics, that's a combination that very few bands have successfully like struck. So, say what you will. I think a lot of their classic stuff is untouchable for that reason. And, that's my opinion, obviously, but that's where my musical journey kind of started, was with them very much.
And I want to also point out, too, it's literally the only metal album in the Library of Congress, so that should tell you how important Master of Puppets is for a lot of us, especially me, especially for you and a lot of people, man.
Yeah, you can't. I mean, like I said, not everybody has to like them, but you can't hate on that, right? You know?
I can't. So after, I guess, just hearing Master of Puppets, like, where did you start to branch off from there? What kind of bands were you starting to get into, I guess?
Yeah, I think a lot of people who grew up listening to heavy metal, Metallica is a very natural, like, starting point for a lot of people, obviously, since they're the biggest of all of those bands. It makes sense that that's where most people would start. And I think from there, the sort of natural progression is right next door from Metallica is to be like, oh, this guy Dave Mustaine used to be in Metallica. He's in this band Megadeth. Let's listen to Megadeth, huh? So I think Megadeth was always definitely like the next stop after that. And then Pantera, stuff like Megadeth and Pantera. And then, you start to dip your toes in newer bands, like, at the time, bands that were coming out in those years. And, a band like Children of Bodom was always a really, like, one of my favorite bands coming up. And they're still putting out stuff, or, they split up, but they're still existing in some form. But, so it's kind of a Metallica to Megadeth to Pantera to whoever the newer bands are. And then from there, I kind of went back in time, and that's where I started getting into the, my friends and I getting into the more old school, like, thrash stuff that we ended up playing as a band when we were growing up.
And how were you discovering all of these bands, like, your Metallicas and Megadeths and whatnot? Like, who was showing you them? Or were you just, like, discovering them on, I guess, on your own? Or, like, was the internet a little bit more prevalent during this time?
That's interesting because, so this was, I mean, if I had to put a time frame on this, it would be, 2004 to, 2006, 2007, that range. So the internet is obviously a thing, but at that time, this is a funny story. The household that I lived in, like, for people who, were maybe not old enough to be dealing with this at the time or whatever, my household was the last household of anyone I knew, really, where we had dial-up internet and not, like, high-speed internet. All of this, like, going on like, MySpace and finding bands and stuff, I was, like, the last of my group of friends to be able to do that because it would take me 20 minutes to load a MySpace profile page. You know what I mean? So I unfortunately, I wasn't able to really seek it out on my own. Now, what happens was, obviously, you have friends, and being young and being in Diamond Plate when we were very, very young, when the guitar player Conrad came in, he was bringing all of this stuff to us that he was, finding places and listening to, and then be like, hey, check out this band Testament. They're pretty cool, right? And yeah, they are pretty cool. And it was really fun going through that process of, being with your friends and discovering new bands as well as bands from, like, what we were listening to, bands in the 80s that shifted and shaped what came after them, and including the stuff that we did as a band.
Now, let's go back real quick, even before starting Diamond Plate. I just want to know how you came just to be being a bass player. Like, what about the bass turned you on to wanting to play that specific instrument?
I wish I had, like, a really cute or really romantic, like, story to relay about that, but it really, for me, was just kind of coincidental. I was very young. The house that I grew up in, my stepbrother was Jim, the drummer of Diamond Plate, and he was a year older than me, and he was playing percussion and drums in school band. So he would have been, 5th or 6th grade or whatever it was, 6th grade, let's say. And he started having a friend come over who played guitar. And because, when you're that young, when you're 11, 12, 13, there's not that many kids, in your neighborhood who are your age who are playing an instrument, that you can jam with. So he started playing drums, and he had his friend coming over, and he was playing guitar, and they were messing around, and I was in the other room playing video games or whatever I was doing at 10, 11 years old. And he's like, hey, do you want to play bass? I'm like, okay, I'm not doing anything. Let's do it. And that's really all it was. Like, there was nothing like wow, I love bass so much. I really want to do it. It was just kind of like, yeah, sure. And then I went with it and I chased it, for 16 years now.
And I'm assuming bass was your first instrument?
Yeah. And that's, I mean, I've gone on to learn how to sing and stuff too, but that was, yeah, as far as playing an instrument, that's the only instrument I've ever really played. Recently, I've been messing more with, just guitar as well. But other than that, that's what I do is bass.
And now let's go to that specific era. So you picked up your first bass, started jamming with the guys just in your garage. It wasn't diamond plate yet, was it, at this point?
At a very early point, it was, we had half a dozen BS little kid band names that we were just cycling through trying to figure out, and not far into it, we did land on that name, and it wasn't exactly obviously how it turned out to be. It wasn't all of the same people, but it was me and Jim and other people operating under that name when we were 12 years old.
And were you just writing names down, and that one just stuck out to you, or is there like a story behind choosing the name?
I think I feel like it was. When you're a kid, you have a lot of ideas, and you're not as afraid to pitch them because you're a kid and you don't know any better. So I think we just cycled through a lot, and eventually, I want to say it was one of the guys' like dads who like had a pickup truck, and he, diamond plating is like the stuff you put on the back of a pickup truck to, make it more heavy duty, and it just fit because it was like a heavy metal, and we were playing heavy metal, so we thought that was cute, I guess.
and why that style of music? Just around the 2003 2004 era, especially in Chicago, of all places. So walk me through the choice of what you guys wanted to, or of why you guys started to play speed metal around that time.
Yeah, I think like I was saying when we were talking about bands earlier, Metallica was the big driving inspirational force for that. And then, just as you branch out of there, it really wasn't about us playing at any certain places in Chicago or being a part of any scene. Like, there may have been some sort of scene going on for that stuff, but we were so young that we weren't a part of that at all. Like, we weren't old enough to play at a lot of places that would be having bands like that. So it was really just about us playing stuff that we liked at the time. And then, as we sort of got out there more, people responded to it and adopted us into that culture and into that scene. And as a very young person, when you're coming up doing that stuff, you become a part of that, and you lean into it, right? Like, hey, all these people like this kind of music, and they like our band a lot. So let's do it. Let's be a part of this.
So let's go to, I guess just going into the garage. So obviously Jim had asked you, like, hey, I want to play bass, and you said, yeah, sure. So what did you do? Go immediately get a bass and go in the garage and start playing covers with them at first, and then start branching off and writing, original material, or was there always this need just to write originals? Yeah,
it was it was crazy because I had no musical background whatsoever. Like, not even in my family, really. Like, there's assorted family members now who, cousins and stuff, who all like they might have been involved in singing or playing something in like school band or whatever, but no parents who was like a musician back in the day, or like uncle who was like really like guiding me on this. It was just kind of me and him being 11 and 12 and learning Metallica songs, and as well as the other guys who we were playing with at the time, just learning, like buying these Metallica tablature books where it's like, oh, you can learn all of the iconic riffs on bass if you read the tabs, or you could buy whole albums. Like, I remember, I think at one point I probably had the first 5 Metallica albums. I probably had tab books for all 5, and there was a good chance that at some point I knew 80% of all the songs from the first 5 Metallica albums on bass, like at 13 years old, So we learned a lot of covers, a lot of Metallica covers, a lot of Megadeth. And then from there, you dabble in like, okay, let's try to do our own one here. And then if we were playing shows, even at a young age, we were playing a blend of covers and originals. And it's crazy. I mean, just talking about it right now, just thinking about how long ago this was. And it's really something to think about, like having all that time behind us.
Absolutely. And by the way, I'm just going to point out, half of those tablatures are wrong. So I would always try and learn like something from there, and then I have to go back and relearn it by either playing the record and saying, "Oh, that's not the right note."
I'm really glad you said that, because you're totally right. Because as a kid, your ear isn't very refined, and so you just play it how the book tells you to play it, and you're like, you might have had an inkling of like, hey, this doesn't sound totally right to me, but why would this book lie to me? And it turns out that a lot of them are wrong. So that's really funny that you brought that up.
and just walk me through the feeling of just, are you just playing bass at this point, or are you singing, or like how did that whole thing like just come into the fold here?
Well, that's an interesting story as well, because I've always had kind of like a social anxiety issue, especially when I was younger. I'm as you get older, you learn how to manage stuff like that and get better with it. But when I was a kid, I had the worst. I couldn't talk in front of people. I definitely I wanted to be a singer, but there was no chance that like I had the balls to sing in front of a group of people at that age. Like 11, 12, 13, I was just flat out too scared. I couldn't do it. But I always wanted to. I wanted to be able to. And at the very earliest stages of the band, we had someone else who was, playing guitar and singing, and, as much as you can. When you're that young, it's really hard for like a male to really find your voice as a singer, because your voice is changing, your body's changing. And so we had another guy, and then once he was not around anymore, we all kind of looked around at each other, and it was like, okay, well, we don't want to like make another new friend, so one of us has to do it. Okay, I guess I'll do it. And I was so terrified. And worth noting, I was really bad at it for a long time, but I just, you just kind of keep doing it and you stick to it. It was not a thing that came naturally to me, but I always wanted it, and I obviously still want it, so I worked at it.
Now, who was the guy that kind of left? Can you give me a name here for this gentleman?
Yeah, well, it's actually pertinent because Jim started another band recently, and he's actually in a band with this guy again. His name's JR. JR Johnson. He was a friend of ours from the neighborhood when we were very young, and he was one of the people who started it when we were 11. Yeah, that was he was playing guitar and singing when we were very young.
So you were always a three-piece. So walk me through when Conrad came into the fold.
Yeah, we were a three-piece for a lot of it, but we were always trying to find a sort of balance to where we could have a second guitar, because obviously we all love guitar harmonies and, dual guitar solos and stuff. So we always wanted to have two very capable guitar players, but when you're that young, it's hard to find enough serious people, right? So we had the three that we had, and then Conrad we met. I think we found him on MySpace, and he lived like a town over. He didn't go to the same school as the three of us had. So we met him when he and I were 14. Conrad and I were in the same grade. And we brought him in when we were going into high school. And yeah, and obviously he turned out to be very good. And that's who we rolled with moving forward after that. And then, we were a three-piece for a long time in that configuration as well, because even through high school, how many people in the suburb of Chicago are you going to find who want to like play Testament songs with you? So yeah, that was about 2006 or so.
Okay.
When we were 14.
So I know you had stated before that there wasn't really like a heavy metal kind of scene around Chicago during those days. Did you start to notice? When did you start to notice, I guess, bands doing the same thing that you were doing, but mostly in either LA or San Francisco or any of those places that were, especially around your age or our age group? Yeah,
it's I wouldn't go as far as to say that there wasn't a scene, but we weren't a part of it because we were little kids, so either we weren't playing at the places that would have been involved in that, or nobody was going to really take us fully seriously, because why would they? Because we were, we were little. But, when I started noticing, like, we would play whatever local stuff we could, where it, like a bar would have like an all ages thing, like all ages showcase for, like where Conrad was getting his guitar lessons, would be like, they would have an event where they would rent out a bar, and the kids who all took lessons at this place they would perform with like a house band, or they would be open to have their band play. So like we would play stuff like that. And then once we actually got good enough and knew enough people where we started to play at clubs and stuff, it was like we would get the weirdest looks, because we're 13, 14 years old and like getting a good response and like playing well and playing better than a lot of bands who were a lot older than us. So it was kind of strange at first. Like I don't think anybody was ever rude or like mean to us or like bullied us, but it was definitely, I think, a good amount of people who were kind of looking at us sideways at first. And that's just locally. And then once we started playing more, people were just like, okay, these guys are just good. Like, let's forget how old they are. They're just good. And then, nationally and like internationally, when you talk about like the overall metal scene, that's where the internet came into play, where, when MySpace was the way to do it, you would find bands like Warbringer, Bonded by Blood, and bands that were all like a little bit older than us, but eventually were kind of our contemporaries. And I mean, you just start to see like these forums online, these talk forums about metal popping up, and like you're a kid and you see someone in Sweden being like, wow, you guys are awesome. Like, you guys are 15 years old. This is so cool. And you start to get validated in that sense. And it just kind of gains momentum from there. And that's how it worked for us.
And walk me through just your first show that you did playing bass and singing at this point. So what was the feeling like for you just getting on that stage and knowing like, oh man, I'm going to have to like, sing and play and hopefully entertain some people?
Man, I that's a great question. Like, I literally just got goosebumps thinking about it, because I was so goddamn scared. Like, I was probably the most terrified I've ever been of anything in my life was doing that. It's crazy. It was at a place, the venue was called Sound Lab, and it was in Mokina, Illinois, which is like a way southwest suburb of Illinois. No, not a notable place at all. But I was so nervous. I remember we weren't like headlining the show or anything. We were just one of, maybe like 5 or 6 bands. I just remember how nervous I was setting all of my equipment up. I remember just being in a complete like fluster, and I was like looking for my cables to hook up my amp. And I was scrambling around to find these cables that I couldn't find that I needed. I was in a rush. And then I would look, and it was like in my hand the whole time. I was just so nervous that I wasn't thinking straight. I was like looking for cables that were literally in my hands already. And I was terrified. And then we started playing, and people loved it. And it was like, that was like our first kind of underground show, where it was like us playing at a real venue with like a scene around it. And it went really well. And I think I don't know if we closed the show. I think it was the closer of our set. We played Slayer, Angel of Death. Everybody there lost their minds completely. Like, everybody was just like on the stage, like stage diving at this place that was not very conducive to stage diving. And I was 14 years old, and these people were going nuts and like loving what we were doing. And I was so scared, but it was such a great payoff for like how scared I had been, to feel how good that show went and how well we were received. It was totally worth it.
Absolutely. And let's back up to what you said before, where you said forms. So I want to mention this, and my buddy, I got to give credit to my buddy Chris from Incinerator for this, mentioning Thrash Unlimited. And Thrash Unlimited was a forum where you would discover like, a bunch of new killer speed metal bands or thrash metal bands. And I remember Diamond Plate was always on there. Like, you guys had your own forum, and this was way before anyone knew who we were, or even started to make a dent. And you guys made a dent just right off the bat. And I'm just kind of curious as to, was that one of the forums where you guys would discover the Warbringers and Bondeds and all those kind of bands?
Yeah, I mean, that Thrash Unlimited was like the one. Like we may have been involved in other ones, but that was the one that exposed us to like you were saying, like exposed us to other bands that were like us, and then also exposed us to a lot of people that were looking for new bands. And I would say the reason we got signed to Earache Records was because of that forum, Thrash Unlimited. Yeah, I think that was a really big part of it. Before social media was the way that it is now, and before everybody had a Bandcamp or a SoundCloud, like you had a MySpace page where you could put up 4 songs, and then you could go on Thrash Unlimited and tell everybody, hey, check out our MySpace page, we just dropped this new song. Like it's crazy to think about it because the world is obviously so different now, but back then that was the way to do it. In the 80s, people were, trading tapes and sending letters to each other of like magazine clippings of like, hey, check out this interview from this band. And this was our version of that, was like being on a forum and posting your music and then seeing what other people post. And it was a big thing for us. And that was really the thing that really helped us take off and develop a fan base outside of the places we were playing locally, because we weren't able to travel. We weren't able to go and do much of any kind of playing on the road because we had school in the morning, so it was nice to be able to have a forum and have a lot of that legwork be taken out for us and have exposure to people in different states and different countries, which as a kid was, mind blowing.
Absolutely. And you also had, we can't forget about MySpace, because they had the top 8, and the top 8 was like, everyone was fighting for the top spot there on everyone's fucking, on everyone's MySpace page.
It was a really big deal. It was a really big deal when I remember, I think Creator's MySpace page had us on their top friends list, and we thought we had made it. It was very cool.
So let's go. Let's move forward just a little bit. So walk me through your first experience just in a recording studio, and what were you guys recording for?
The first thing that I guess we dabbled with, like recording on a very, very primitive level when we were super young, just to have it. So like when you're going to school, you could tell your friends like, hey, this is my band CD. And it was awful. It was terrible, but like, it was just what you did. But as far as like actual recording with a purpose, we did the Mountains of Madness EP. So we would have been probably about 14 years old. And that was the first time where we hired someone to actually record us professionally. That was done in Conrad's basement, his family's basement, where we had our friend Arthur Yanoda, who has gone on to be a very successful sound engineer. He was well on his way when we knew him, but he was he's like toured with Stomp, like the Broadway, like Stomp, like he does stuff like that now, which is crazy to think that he was recording us in a basement, 15 years ago. But that was the first time where we actually brought an outside person in to record us and like work on it together. So we just wanted to have like a 4-song EP where we could sell it for whatever amount of money, and just so we could distribute that, because that was all you had back then. You didn't have, Instagram likes or shares to go off of, all the social media stuff. All you had was like the raw product to make and distribute. So you had to have something like that in order to make a dent in any of this, and we were young, but we were just trying to do what we thought was the things that we were supposed to do to build this thing up. We didn't know everything, and we weren't geniuses by any means, but we just thought like, hey, we're in a band, we should have CDs and we should sell them. So we did the Mountains of Madness EP in probably 2006 or so.
And what you call it? So what was the initial response just for, I guess, getting this demo out? Like, what did people start to think, or especially in your local area?
It was crazy because Conrad, Jim, and I, at this point when we were just a three-piece of us three, we all went to the same high school, and we would literally sit at our lunch table either during our lunch period or like in the morning before school started and we would sit at this lunch table, and we had like an assembly line of us constructing the little like jewel case CDs. So we had like, this guy slides in the insert, this guy puts the sticker label on the disc, and then this guy does whatever else. Like we were putting all these things together at school. So we would, if people at school would see us doing those things, they would naturally be like, hey, what the hell are you guys doing? Oh, you're in a band? Okay, I'll buy it. And they probably never listened to it once, but people at school were buying it just because they wanted to support us, and our family members would buy it. And then we would put the music up, on MySpace or whatever. And it was raw, and it was very, very imperfect. But I think for us, we were so young that people were just blown away by kids that age putting that kind of thing out. The reception was fine, but like I said, I think most of the acclaim and most of the response was centered around the fact that we were super young and people were just like totally confused by the whole thing.
So, but you guys got approached by Stormspell. How did that whole thing come to be? Because they were putting out some, what they called Thrash Clash volumes, and you were on one of the very early ones, and I'm just wondering kind of how that came to be.
Yeah, that's where this all kind of like this confluence and like perfect storm of a lot of things happening at once at like the right time is, as anybody who's ever done anything with any sort of success, like, you have to be kind of lucky as well. And with the Stormspell split, I think that was like the perfect storm of, that was from Thrash Unlimited, whereas they were a presence on there, so they saw us on there, I'm sure. So that was just like the right time. We put it out at the right time. They saw it, and they were like everybody else. They're like, well, these guys are super young and they're not awful, so let's give it a shot. And if they blow up in a couple of years, we're going to look really good. We did that at the right time, and that was cool. And I always say, like, this, whenever I talk about that with people, like friends and stuff, they talk about the split. Like, I thought the other band was awesome too. Like the band, I think they were from Sweden, called Oppression. I liked their song way better than ours, so I was like, this is great. Like, and
they went on. I mean, Olaf is from Enforcer, so that was kind of his first, project. Before.
I had no idea that was him. Okay, that makes sense then. I remember the kid like just comparing us to the other band on the split and being like, "Oh, these guys are better. Like, this is awesome." Okay, but nobody ever talked about that as far as to me, because they just wanted to talk about my band to me. I thought that was cool. I thought they were awesome. So that makes sense though, because Olaf is a badass and that band and Enforcer is very good. So that makes a lot of sense.
And it's just a historical piece as well. You have Diamond Plate, who went on to become, successful in their own right, and then obviously Enforcer, pre-Enforcer, I should say. So,
well, that's crazy. That's something very interesting to look back on. And before you said that was him, I didn't even know he was on that. So that opened my eyes to something that I did not know about. At that same time frame. So like I was saying, like just kind of a perfect storm of things happening at the right time. We were getting the recognition we were getting on underground metal websites and forums and stuff like Thrash Unlimited. We got a very good opportunity. We opened for Overkill at a venue in the same town as the other venue I told you about, Sound Lab. This venue was called the Pearl Room, and that was like an actual like pretty good sized club where national acts would tour. So a band like Overkill, would tour and play at the Pearl Room in Mokina, and that was like a really big deal for us. Like when we were 13, 14, we were just like, man, I would kill to like get an opening slot for national acts at the Pearl Room. Like the Pearl Room's like a big deal, and that would be great. So our first show there was with the UK Sabbat or Sabbath. I actually never knew if it's Sabbath or Sabbat, but Andy Sneap's band from the 80s. They did a reunion tour, and one of their very few shows was at the Pearl Room. We got to open there. And then we did the Overkill show, and that was a real turning point for us because we had our shitty little demos that we made in our lunch period, and we were selling them at a merch table. And we had, after we played our opening set for Overkill, we had a line of people like to the door, from our merch table to the door. We sold out at the snap of a finger at that show, and that was a real turning point where all of the people in Chicago who liked stuff like Overkill now knew who we were and that kind of ingratiated us into the scene more than we were.
And this must have made you feel really good. And here's where I'm going with this. You are kind of like me. I do suffer from anxiety a lot, and just knowing that you had that much of like a response and stuff probably made you feel good, just or more comfortable just as a vocalist. Do you know what I mean? Around this specific period.
Oh yeah, the positive like feedback and reinforcement goes a really long way for anyone who is having those kind of issues. No, you really can't understate how helpful that was, and how much it kind of validated, like, okay, we were just playing at our house, and then we've been working on this stuff, and we're trying our best, and then but once you get on like an actual venue, like big stage, and you have a good show, and people want to talk to you afterwards as a teenager, it does go a long way into helping you feel more confident and feel like you belong there, you know?
Absolutely. And let's move forward. So how did you take that confidence and apply it into the Relativity EP, and just explain the whole process for writing it and recording this one?
Yeah, so we were in a tough spot where I think a lot of people joke about this too. Like if you, I think if you talk to any of the guys who are, still present in these bands, like, if you talk about like a Lich King, like, Tom from Lich King, and guys like that, like, I'm still friends with Vic from Vindicator. So when we talk to those guys about stuff like this, like they joke around, like we released 4 different versions of the song at the Mountains of Madness. Like, we re-recorded it. Like every time we recorded something new, we would include that because we knew it was a good song. So we wanted to make sure every time like we got better, like from a like playing perspective, as well as every time the recording quality got better, we wanted to make sure that song was on there. So it was really just, a couple years after like starting to have some success of like people taking notice of us, we wanted to keep putting out stuff in the hopes that eventually we would just get signed. So it was just kind of like clicking refresh every like year and a half or so. Like, hey, we're young, we're getting exponentially better like every day, and we want to make sure like we throw as many darts at the dartboard here as possible, and and capture whatever possible, like whatever lightning we could hope to catch in a bottle here. We want to make sure we catch it. So it was cool. Like, and that is probably our most well-received thing we ever put out was the Relativity EP, because it still had a lot of like the really raw and like honestly like unpolished feel to it. Not saying that in a bad way, but just that's what it was. And it was us really starting to kind of find our footing into what kind of stuff was going to be our sound and our type of style. Absolutely.
And speaking of style, let me go back just like, a year and walk me through recording the music video for Mountains of Madness, because this is the first time that you guys came on my radar, was this specific music video, and I have no idea what any of the background for it is. It looks like it was in a professional kind of studio setting where you had multiple cameras and you guys were super young. Your voice, and I don't know if you've heard this, you probably have, but I'm going to say it anyway. You have one of the most distinct voices, especially in our new school metal scene, in my opinion. And so walk me through just the whole video process.
Okay, so when you first started talking about that, I was thinking of like the like from the album, like the music video, but you're talking about like the OG like YouTube.
Oh yeah,
I know what you're talking about. The one, like that was another thing. So we had like that's the one. We had like the Thrash Unlimited stuff going on. We had the Overkill show. I don't know which came first. It was I think the video came before the Overkill show, if I'm being honest. So all these things are all happening within the span of 6-8 months of each other or whatever it was. So this video was our sound engineer, the guy who recorded the EPs, both the Mountains of Madness EP and the Relativity EP. The guy I mentioned before, Arthur. I believe he was taking classes at or some kind of course like for music production at Columbia College, which is a place that people who want to pursue they have music classes, and then they have like sound engineer courses and all manner of recording stuff offered at Columbia. And he was doing his education there, and part of one of his courses, or if it was like a final project, was the class had to record a band in like a live video studio setting. So he knew us because he had recorded us, and he pitched the idea to his teacher or whoever was running this project, and said, "Hey, I've got this like heavy metal band of 14-year-old kids. Like, how about we just use them? We don't have to pay them or anything to be in our video. They'll just do it." So, and it turned out great for us because it was just so strange to see like kids that young playing that kind of music in that kind of setting. It's something that doesn't happen often because you have to pay for that kind of stuff usually. And we were fortunate that we knew the right person and we didn't have to pay for it. And that video did a lot for us, and that I assume it's still up. And I think the last time I looked at it, it was, in like the hundreds of thousands of YouTube views. And that's really strange to think about.
Well, was it particularly live, or was it done with the demo track over it or something?
No, we were playing 100% live, and we did for that video, for that day, we did a full set. Like we probably did like an hour's worth of stuff in that studio that day. And I'm terrible at this stuff, like especially as the story kind of unfolded in a more negative way for me. Like I was very bad about holding on to all this stuff, and like for nostalgia and posterity, I was never that kind of guy to like hold on to all that stuff. But someone somewhere has a DVD of us in that studio playing like all the songs we had at that time, and like a bunch of covers too. That's out there somewhere, but it was 100% live. It was not us playing to like a demo or anything. It was just us playing.
That's amazing, dude. Seriously. Now let's go to the Relativity EP still. I still wanted to discuss the process of recording. How long did it take to do this specific EP? And I guess why an EP at this specific moment for you guys?
I don't remember precisely, but my memory as far as like the time frame was, we would basically lock ourselves in the basement for like a couple days straight and just hammer it out. Like it wasn't like, we're going to take a week and work on it a little bit this day. We didn't have money. Like whatever money we were using to pay people to record us was either from like t-shirt sales or like demo sales. As we all know, we weren't getting paid really to play anywhere at that point. Or it was like we were young enough to where we could be like, hey, like go to somebody's parents and be like, hey, do you mind shelling out like $200 to get this guy to record us or something? So, when the wallet is that tight, you can't really take the time to do it the right way. You have to get it done as fast as you can. So we were, if my memory serves me correctly, it would have been like a one weekend thing. Like, hey, this day we're going to get all the drums done for all, I think it was 4 songs. We're going to get all 4 songs done right away. Boom, boom, boom. Guitars, bass, vocals. All right, see ya. 2 days, done. That's my memory of it. Although I could be off, but that's what sticks out in my head about that.
And I'm not going to ask you the response question because this thing got a huge response, and it made its way over into the LA, Southern California scene. And I specifically remember this EP and loving it when I first heard it. I think I saw you at Thrasho to Mile 5, with opening for, I think Evil Dead was the headliner, if I'm not mistaken. That's when I first met you guys. I was sitting at a merch table with the Evil Dead camp. You guys came over with a former member, Danny, because Danny was really into you guys, and he hands me your guys' EP, and it's fucking awesome. And I'm just curious what transpired after, in between the releasing the Relativity EP to Thrasher. So what happened in between those specific era?
Yeah, so it was. I'm trying to piece together the exact time frame. Obviously, it's a long time ago, and it all kind of starts to blend together, But we played 2 thrash shows. So the one that you're talking about, I believe, was our second year playing it, and that was a great, man. That was so cool. That was a really cool festival. The first one we played I believe that was, the one you're saying is 5, then it would have been 4, which was Exumer was the headliner. And that was crazy because they hadn't been around for a long time before that. So what our focus was, we were just really, we had, after the Overkill show that we played, that's when we started working on the Relativity EP. And then from there, we're just kind of building our local base. I can describe all this and act like it was part of some big plan and we were very strategic about it. I can say it that way now, but it was not that at all. We were just winging it at the time. We were just like, okay, well, people want us to play, so let's play this show here this month. Let's play here the next month, and try to get on good national shows, like try to get good opening slots for national acts. Since the Overkill show went so well, we really wanted to try to have more shows like that one, obviously. And we got some good people managing us after that show, and that opened up some opportunities. That opened up opportunities like, being able to go to Thrasher de Mayo. And it was really just about just trying to get on the right shows and trying to make sure that when we did get on those shows, that we were making the most out of it by like being really good. Like we want it. That's something if somebody's coming up in a band now, I would say, a lot of people focus too much on like, man, if we could just like get this show, we'd be set. And I think a lot of people worry too much about getting those shows. And then when they get them, they're not prepared to make the most of the opportunity. I would say focus on just making sure you're really good first before you try to get on some big show.
Absolutely. And walk me through, because you guys were more technical, especially around this era. Everyone else was, mostly like the standard stuff, but you guys were playing blistering speeds. But you also had like a technicality to it. So I'm just wondering where that came from with, your musical upbringing. Like, where did the technicality come from?
It's just, it's just being really young and absorbing things in the way that you do when you're that age. Like, I can't claim to take too much credit for like forging that sound, because really I was the one who started last and who probably had the least amount of training or educational foundation in terms of music. Like I had the least of that of all of us. So I was always kind of catching up in that sense. And especially once I started like being the vocalist too, like now I'm doing two things. Like I'm doing two things and I'm behind on both of them relative to the rest of the group. So I was always kind of like catching up in that sense. So like a lot of that like technicality was just with like the riffs, obviously Conrad just playing a bunch of crazy picking patterns and playing a bunch of wild stuff. And then, us working it out together and like putting it together into a song. Like it was, we were listening to a lot of, like bands, like I think if you listen to that era, like the technicality could be pretty tightly traced back to a band like Death is one of my favorite metal bands. And I'm sure the guys would say the same, the other guys. So a lot of the technicality came from like listening to, Symbolic or The Sound of Perseverance from Death, like albums like that really, really played a part in that aspect of it.
Let's talk Thrasho now. When did you guys get the opportunity to play? Did you guys have to submit anything to, the management team that was handling Thrasher de Mayo, or did you how did that all come into play, man? I
think that was pretty 100% like Thrash Unlimited, an opportunity that Thrash Unlimited forum opened for us, where if you had a band that was on Thrash Unlimited and it was of decent quality and people were responding well to it, then like you could get on that show, that's I think that's how we got on. And they had some success with the years previous, but I don't know if the first couple had as much like national talent or if it was more primarily like local California bands in those first couple ones. But I definitely got the sense that with the two that we played, they put more of an emphasis on like trying to get some out of state bands to join as well. So obviously that worked in our favor for that. They had plenty of California bands play them, but then to have, Evil Dead play and then have us from Chicago, Vindicator play, from Ohio, and people coming from all over to be at this festival. It was really cool, man. And that was another one of those moments where it was like I couldn't believe how well we were received, especially the first one where I was probably 15 years old still, to be playing in Los Angeles when you're a kid from Chicago and have people like losing their minds over what you're playing. It was one of the coolest things I had done obviously to that point, and then even still, it was a really great feeling.
Absolutely. And then obviously they asked you back, right? You played Thrash Show 5. Now, what transpired after Thrash Show 5? Was it just these one-off shows that you were doing for Thrash Show? Did you guys have a tour booked? Walk me through that.
Yeah, that was just one-off for both of those, because we were very much in high school still. So I think that was part of the problem. I'm trying to piece this all together. We had to like take off school to go do it. So there was no like, okay, we're going to, like what most bands would do is what you described. They would set up a bunch of dates that they could play on the way to the final destination of Los Angeles and then even on the way back, just to make it work financially. But for us, that was not possible. We weren't going to be able to be gone for, multiple weeks. We just had to buy plane tickets and go. And yeah, it was just a one-off situation. We didn't have a whole lot planned beyond that. It was always just kind of, okay, what's the next big thing we could try to get on to move the needle and keep this moving in a positive direction. And so Thrash Show was always one of those. And then it was just about trying to get on, good local, or if not local, maybe somewhere neighboring city Milwaukee or something in Indiana, if it was close enough, to just try to get in front of the most people possible. That's really the only goal. We didn't have tours lined up. We didn't have a record deal lined up at that point. We were just trying to keep it moving, because at that point too, as we're getting to the point where Conrad and I are going to be graduating high school, this does not sound like a big deal, but when you're that age, you have a lot of people pressuring you to be like, okay, well, what are you going to do after you graduate? Are you you really going to keep doing this, or are you going to go to college? Because if you go to college, guess what? You're not ever going to be doing any touring, that's not going to be possible. So you kind of got to figure it out quick here, buddy. So we didn't have a lot set in stone. We were just kind of working hard and hoping for something to pop as a result.
And what transpired? What were some of the shows that you guys were getting after Thrash Show 5?
After Thrash Show 5, I don't know if it was after. I actually think it would have been a little bit before. But some of the bigger national shows that we played, we were doing, the Overkill one was a turning point. What else did we do? We played. Oh man, this might have even been before that Overkill show. So this is going backwards a little bit on the chronology, but. We played with Merciless Death at this random bar in the northwest suburbs of Illinois. They were on tour and we played a show with them. That was a cool one, and they were at the Thrash Show 4 when we played. They were one of the headlining bands there. We did. Oh no, I guess this is a good story. We our manager at the time, Frank of FM Entertainment, was He's a very well connected guy in the Midwest, and in terms of talent buying and stuff. So we got a lot of opportunities as a result of working with him. And we were in high school. Conrad and I were seniors in high school, so 17 years old. It was, I believe, January. There was a tour going on. It was Behemoth and the name of the band that got stuck in a snowstorm, Lightning Swords of Death. Does that ring a bell to anybody?
Yes, I think they're an LA band. I
think that was them. Yes. Yeah. Okay. I think it was them. They were on tour with Behemoth, and they got stuck in a snowstorm. And so they, the House of Blues Chicago called Frank. That's where the show was supposed to be that night. They're like, hey, do you got anybody who could fill in and play this slot for this Behemoth show at the House of Blues? And so we got a call from our manager while Conrad and I were sitting in class together. And Conrad had to like get up and like pretend to go to the bathroom so he could go on his cell phone and like talk to Frank and work it out. And then he and I both had to text our moms to like call us out of high school to like get us out to make sure we could get to load in at the House of Blues in time.
Wow.
So that's a funny thing to think back to. It was like, hey mom, can you tell the nurse that I have to go home because I got to go play with a satanic death metal band. Let's do it.
And this is way before obviously they broke and fucking became huge and was on every fucking tour. So this was
it was kind of in the beginning. It was a big show for us. It was a big show, but yeah, they weren't like they were probably 80% of what they ended up being. Yeah, at that point.
Yeah, exactly. Now, when did Diamond Plate become a 4-piece? When did your second guitar player actually come in?
That was almost entirely just like obviously it was something we always wanted. We always preferred it that way, and we always kind of wrote and recorded for there to be 2 guitar players, but we never landed on anyone who we, found to be, good enough, reliable enough. And also we were kind of foolishly married to the, like, well, we're the young band. So if we're 17 and you're 25, this isn't going to work, which is really dumb. That was a mistake to be that way. But, at the time, that's how we were thinking. Like we liked being a lot younger than everybody else and having that kind of extra characteristic. So, we were looking for someone our age. When you start to put that many filters on a position, it gets really hard to fill the position. So we were a 3-piece for a long time because we never found someone who was 17 and super ready to like pursue this as a career, who was good and who looked the part and who liked the same stuff as us. That was rare. So once we got signed and we were starting all this stuff to be put in motion, we knew we were going to be having full-length tours and stuff, we knew we wanted to have somebody else. So we kind of started looking around and asking around and trying out a few people. And I want to say through Thrash Unlimited is how we all got to know Mario, who was from Miami. And so, he started talking to us, and we had gone back and forth on MySpace or like on AIM, like Instant Messenger. Like he and I would talk a lot. And then, once it came time that we were thinking about like, hey, we could bring somebody in, we threw the option out to him, and he was, he was willing to like make it happen. So we worked on it, and that's how we knew we wanted somebody. It was just about, finding someone who we thought was a good fit, which took a long time.
And what about him impressed you enough to want to ask him to join? At
that time, at that age, like I was saying, like, you as a 16, 17-year-old kid, you might have friends who are like your same age who are good at guitar, like good enough at guitar to play in the band. But when you're that young and you're in a band that actually does like serious stuff, it's very rare that you're going to find someone who is both good enough to play it and also like on top of their shit enough to be prepared. And what we kept running into was we would have people we knew, like people who we knew were like good and who were like better than us at playing instruments in our neighborhood or in our age group. And they would show up and we would tell them like, hey, learn these 2 songs and then like, we'll play them and this will be your audition. And then they would, like, we knew these guys were good, and then they would show up and they're like, oh yeah, I didn't get to that one. Like, okay, well, we told you to learn 2 songs and you learned 1 song. So what are we doing here? With Mario, he knew all the songs already. Like he learned them for fun because he liked the band, and we didn't even have to tell him to do anything. And he showed up and he knew all the songs already.
Cool. So he was prepared. That's awesome. That's
and that's really exactly what we were looking for at the time. Was like we were just so burnt out on people our age acting. Looking back on it, they were acting their age. They were 17, like they were kids. So of course they're going to be like that. But at the time, we were taking it more seriously than everybody else. So for a guy to come in from out of state and fly in and be on top of everything, we were just over the moon. Like and maybe we should have given it more thought, but that's all it took at the time. Was just like, man, you knew your stuff. You're on it. Like you look the part. You're same age as us. You were prepared. Let's do it. Like, say no more.
So it's just like the Jason Newsted story where it's like, oh, I got these songs, and you learn pretty much the whole set. That's awesome. So let's go for it. You guys get signed to Earache, right? A little bit before this. What is the deal for?
Like specifics of the deal?
Yeah, like how many records did they put you on for, and whatnot?
Oh, it was a 5-record deal, which is a lot. And I think they were obviously when they did that, they were banking on our age and us, kind of developing. I think they rightfully knew that we were kind of a project, even though we were advanced for our age, maybe that doesn't mean that we were anywhere near a finished product, obviously, and that bore out to be correct. So, I think they were taking a long-term approach to it, and it was great that it was a great feeling to have them, interested. I would say, we were so young that I think we really would have benefited from more guidance than we got, because we were a little overeager to jump on the first significant offer that we got. And I think when you're that young, you need somebody older. It's this is where if we had hired another guitar player who was 25, who had bills and had a job and had a real life and not just high school, I think we would have had somebody around who would have been wait a second, guys, let's not rush into this. Let's see what happens. And that's, not to say anything bad about Earache. They were very, very good to us as far as I'm concerned. But signing a record deal right out of high school is a process that looks really good on the resume and looks really good on paper, but it's something that I would caution a lot of people about. If you're in that kind of situation, you don't want to hear it, but patience pays off in those situations. You don't need to jump on anything.
Huh. So did you guys end up even hiring an entertainment lawyer to look at the contract, or did you just willy-nilly just sign it away and that was kind of it?
No, it wasn't like that. It wasn't like we got taken advantage of or anything like that. It was just, we had our management, and Frank was great, and he had all the connections you would need to facilitate something like this. And he had an entertainment lawyer who looked at the contract. The contract was fine, and it wasn't like a terrible bad deal or anything, but it was just, it was just a situation where I think we would have really benefited from more seasoning before feeling like the, deadlines and feeling like, okay, well, there's this other entity of a record company that's expecting something from us. We need to do this. We need to hurry and get this done. I think we really needed more guidance and more seasoning. We thought we were ready, and I think everybody thinks they're ready, and maybe you never really are, but we would have benefited from taking a deep breath and reassessing. That's really all it is. It wasn't anything in bad faith from either side. It wasn't like we got screwed or we got robbed. It was nothing like that. Earache was always really cool, but it's just for the long-term benefit of, and obviously we know how it worked out. We would have been better off if we had a little bit more time. And
see, we don't know how it worked out because there's been no record of how Diamond Plate. I didn't even know you guys had broken up after the second record, because after that second record had come out, nothing was said, no tours were announced. It was just they had a tour booked. They did the tour for it, and then that was it. But before that, hopefully we can get into some of that stuff and figure out kind of what happened. Just because there's not a lot of interviews on Diamond Plate, so I specifically do not know the actual story behind all that. But I digress. Let's go a little bit before and just walk me through Generation Y, and what you guys did differently as opposed to, say, the Relativity record, because it's vastly different. Yes, it has most of the same songs on it. Production is a lot thicker, and you had slowed some stuff down. So walk me through all of that, your thought process when it came to your first debut record. Yeah.
I think where we were coming from, the two EPs that we had were super raw, super just, fast. Probably, I doubt maybe Relativity had a click track to it. I don't remember. I haven't listened to it a long. If I listened to it, I would be able to tell right away. But I don't remember. It was just really raw, really fast, really hectic, and it had that kind of energy, which is totally great for what it was, and people obviously liked it. But part of what happens when you're writing material for a fan base and not just for yourself is you have to kind of walk that tightrope of writing stuff that you would want to listen to, but then also trying to like meet and exceed the expectations of the people who are going to be paying for it. And when you're that young, you're kind of idealistic about it, and you think like, well, I play music that I want to play, and if people want to buy it, they can buy it. That's kind of how we approach it. Like, we obviously loved like the faster stuff. We still liked all the thrashy stuff. We still liked all those bands. Really, like, we had been doing that stuff for like 5 years already at that point, and we were kids who were growing up and developing our own unique tastes and musical preferences. So like, nobody who likes any kind of music when they're 14 is going to like the same music when they're 18 or 19. You know, like, there's going to be some overlap. Like, if you like metal, you're probably going to like metal forever, like, of course. But, you know, most people when they're 14, they're not playing Testament songs, you know? And if they were playing Testament songs, the truth is that when they're 18 or 19, they're probably going to have, you know, kind of morphed into something else in some other type of genre by then. It's just a natural thing that happens. Your tastes change, your preferences change. You don't want to do the same things all the time, and you want to try different stuff. And for us, we were kind of branching out in a sort of a reverse fashion from what most people do. Most people grow up listening to more radio or like radio rock friendly stuff, and then they go into the deeper, more underground stuff. We kind of started off with the underground stuff, and then as we got older, I know I can speak for myself on this. Like, I gained a lot more appreciation for more, like, for lack of a better word, like more mainstream style stuff. Now, we weren't gonna like be Nickelback or anything, but like we wanted to be more accessible for the general metal public than just like an underground thrash band. I think was the main thinking was like, hey, we're still going to play fast, we're still going to play thrashy stuff, but like we like stuff besides this too.
Absolutely. And like I said, it's a thicker kind of piece in your guys' catalog. It's like the production is super like heavy, but it's just, I don't know whatever guitar tone you guys use or your drum tone, your bass tone, but everything is just crushing on this record. So you guys obviously used a click track for it.
Yeah.
And you had, it's pretty much just it's a 10-song record with an intro and a cool instrumental. It's one of my favorite records just from this whole era in general, because it's like 2011, so you know the thrash scene was massive. I mean, this is like the peak of all that stuff. Now, what was the reception from all of it?
Well, to be honest, and maybe this is just me being a little jaded or pessimistic, most of our fans did not like it, as far as I can tell. Most of the people who like followed us from the first EPs to then, I think a lot of them were disappointed by it. And like I get it, and I don't begrudge anyone for having their own ideas or opinions of what they want to hear. But it was hard. It was hard having that first really big leap kind of miss the mark a little bit in terms of like, you know, when you're picturing that moment as a kid and, you know, growing up playing music, you picture that moment as like, okay, we're really gonna nail it and everybody's gonna love it and we're really gonna take off. And it was kind of mixed, and that's not what you hope for, and that's not what you set out for. So it was kind of a weird feeling, especially like going through that as a young person.
Absolutely. But what didn't they like about it specifically?
You know, it was like you said, it was slowed down a little bit. It was a little bit more. We wanted to be a little bit. I don't want to say like a little bit heavier, because it's not to say that stuff that is fast isn't heavy, but we wanted to slow it down a little, allow like some of the groove of like the riffs and the drums to really like come through a little bit better.
To breathe.
And I think, yeah, and I think part of the thinking was that like when you do that and then you like rip out some really fast stuff, like it kind of highlights it better. You know, I think it was kind of like a let it breathe and you know, less is more kind of approach. Like if we just did this nonstop, just blasting stuff like that would be great, and some people would really like that. But for it to be more, you know, appealing to more people and also to fit our sensibilities of what we wanted to play, it was kind of we kind of wanted to have some of that groove in there as well as some of the speed and the technicality that I think was still present, but just not as present as most people wanted it to be.
Yeah, I just think there's a lot more dynamic when you slow things down, and when that fucking crushing part comes in, it really hits you, you know. But walk me through, this is like your first, I guess in like a professional setting, you know, this is kind of your first album, first experience in a huge studio on a real record label, man. I mean, what was that experience like for you, just personally? And what was doing the vocals kind of a tougher thing because you had more songs to do?
Yeah, it was a lot, man. I mean, and that's still like, you know, you sign a record deal and people think that like, okay, we made it, like now somebody else can worry about all this like money stuff and blah blah blah. And you know, the way that it turns out, especially, you know, nowadays and back then, the record deal isn't like an end all be all thing where it's like it's not necessarily a transformative event. Like it's great to have those people on your side, but you know, we were still working within a budget. And you know, it was a bigger budget than before, but it was still like something we had to adhere to, and we were still super young. And you know, so we worked with Neil Kernan, who, you know, recorded and who engineered and you know, produced the album. And he's done all kinds of great things in metal in the past, and he is a wonderful man. Like just really like great for me as like a super scared young kid. Like he was great to work with. He played the outro guitar solo on the instrumental track on the album. He played guitar on it. He played the solo. Just a really great guy, and knew his stuff obviously from his many years of experience. We recorded at a place called Rax Track Studios in Chicago. It wasn't super big. It wasn't like a crazy fancy place, but it had some history to it. Some notable people had recorded there, and it was great. I think weirdly enough, there was 2 rooms in Rax Tracks. We were in room B, which is the smaller one, and in room A at a similar time was Tom Hanks' son was a rapper, and he was recording an album in room A of Rax Tracks while we were there. So that was a funny story.
You're talking the actor, like the Tom Hanks' son, like meaning the guy that went on to acting. No, okay, so you're thinking of Colin. That's Tom Hanks' son, Colin. Right.
It was not him. It would have been his brother.
Okay.
I believe his real name is Chester Hanks. He had a rap name. I forget what it was, but he was recording in the studio next to us basically while we were there. But we were on such a time crunch that we were trying to get all this done. I think we had a week. I think that's what it was. It was crazy. It was like, okay, we're going to go, and we're going to be there for 14 hours today. And then we're going to go home and we're going to go to sleep. And then we're going to come back and we're going to do another 14 hours. And you might do that in like 3-day stretches and then take a little bit of time off and then have the rest of, you know, I want to say it was 7 days. It could have been 5 days. I'm not totally sure, but it all happened very quickly. It was a whirlwind of just trying to get it done on time and in budget. And, you know, for me personally, it was a lot of weight because I was, as a singer, just like it was always evolving and always changing and always trying to get better and trying to learn. So, you know, it was cool because at the time, I actually had felt like I had made a good amount of progress by that point. Like I know I was not anywhere near a finished product, but I had started to figure some things out, and it was, to me, it was a lot better than how I sounded on the EPs. Now, stylistically, a lot of the fans did not like how the vocals were sounding at that point, but I felt pretty good about it, and I was able to do my share of the recording. Like all of my parts were recorded. I was pretty on top of it. We spent a lot of time in prep to make sure we were prepared because we knew we had such a finite amount of time to get this done.
Absolutely. And for the record, I've always loved your voice. I think I remember meeting you and telling you that too, for some weird, strange reason. I was just a big Diamond Plate fan.
Oh, I appreciate that. I would say you're not to sound too like I'm making fun of myself tue hard here, but I think you're in the minority on that because I think a lot of people.
That's fine. I've always been in the minority. Don't you know that?
I appreciate that. And I think what you're thinking of when we first met, if you said the thrash show, I don't recall that as well, but you opened for us at Chain Reaction, right?
Oh my God. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, right?
Yeah. Was that the Kitty show?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I wanted to talk about that one because that's when I remember, like I knew you and of you because we were probably like connected on whatever websites or whatever, but the first time I remember meeting and talking to you was at that show. And that was us on our first full-length tour with Kitty and Dirge Within, and your band opened for us at that one. And that was like a transformative show for us too, where it was like the first time on that, and the only time on that tour really, where it was like our crowd. Like all those people who were there, they were all kids who saw that Blanco de Mayo.
Yes. You're bringing back some memories. I'm sorry. I'm excited. I do remember that. I remember all of our fans were there cheering you guys on too. Where it was, because it was close to L.A. and you had done some thrash shows and had your own fan base. And I think our just collective things, because we were kind of a more speed metal band back in those times too. And you guys had just put out the record, so it makes a lot of sense why you would have a great reaction. Just because us two bands are doing kind of the same thing, so our crowds would have kind of mixed a little bit. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, it was perfect for that, and that was like it was a great feeling it was the first time where we felt like, okay, we're developing a fan base outside of like our hometown, and like that was the first time where that actually like it felt that way, and you could see it happening. And that was a result of us playing a thrash show, and then also like the people that you guys brought in obviously that day. It was a total like. It was like a total thrash show feel for like a show that was very much not a thrash show in terms of the bands that were playing, because I'm sure a lot of those kids were not Kitty fans, and I don't mean that facetiously. I just like they just weren't. And I love Kitty was great to us, and they were awesome on that tour. I'm not disparaging them, but those kids were not there to see them, which was a good feeling for us.
And also, too, I think this was on like a Wednesday or Thursday. Wasn't this like a weeknight show? For some reason, I don't know why, if I'm remembering it correctly, but I know it was not a weekend.
That was crazy because it was really bumping, and I wish I could say for sure if I could find my tour lanyard, it would say the date and I could figure it out, but
I'd have to go in my archives to figure it out.
Yeah, exactly. We have to look up some real old stuff.
Man, yes, but I guess my initial point to all this was that you guys have made a very great record. And yes, you're right. I am in the minority, and that's totally fine. But I always loved your vocals. I don't know what it was. I think because your style and my style were kind of relatively the same. Like I was doing that it wasn't singing and it wasn't growling. It was more like a yelling kind of style. I think you just had a more hardcore stylistic approach in your voice that I didn't have.
I see what you mean. For me it was never like I like plenty of death metal. Like I like plenty of stuff that is like super low and guttural and like growly, and I have total respect for that stuff. But that was never what I wanted to do. I always wanted to be more of like a traditional singer, but I lacked a few things to be able to do that. I lacked the confidence to do it. I didn't have the know-how. And, when you're growing up, you really kind of think that like singing is just, or being a vocalist or being a singer is just a thing that some people are born with and can do inherently, like a natural talent or gift. And when you're young and you try and you fail at it a lot, you start to really think like, oh man, I just can't do that. I guess I'm not ever going to be Ronnie James Dio, like it's just not going to happen. I guess I'm not one of those guys. So I kind of just did what felt okay and what was working. And, you know, it came out the way it came out because at the time, that's all I knew how to do, honestly.
Yeah, like I said, I loved your approach on this record, and I'm sad to hear that, you know, there wasn't a lot of that. I kind of got that too, just going, you know, when the record was new, just being around those specific times. But like I said, it doesn't matter to me if everyone else hated it, because I loved it. So why should it matter? Now walk me through when Mario kind of either was stepping aside or it wasn't working properly.
Well, the time frame of that that's actually kind of outside the scope of my time in the band. So I was fired from the band before he was.
Oh, okay. Well, let's go to that point then. So when were you having issues, or when were they having issues with whatever was going on?
Yeah. So no secret to anyone who, you know, listening, who knows Diamond Plate or who knows me. While we were, it's all right. I'm going to try to keep it as concise as I can. So my mom was diagnosed with late stage ovarian cancer would have been fall of 2010, I think. And this was right after we signed our record deal. And, you know, we recorded Generation Y in the following February. So it would have been February 2011, I think. Throughout all of that progress that we were making of like getting signed, recording the album, starting to do like legitimate tours, and starting to feel like we're really making progress and gaining momentum, throughout all of this good stuff, the backdrop for me was that my mom was very sick and probably going to die. So it was a hard line to walk, where it's like everybody's really happy for the things that are going on with me and the band, and there's a lot of stuff that, you know, you should feel happy about and feel excited about. And the truth is, I was just always really depressed through a lot of stuff that, like, people would look at me and they're like, why are you not like over the moon right now? Like, you're, you know, and part of that is just my nature. By nature, I'm a pretty level-headed guy. I don't get too high or too low usually, but, you know, I was always the one in the group who was just not as excited about everything. And, like I said, part of that was based in, I think, maturity, but part of it was also based in, like, I was depressed about what was going on in my life, and I, you know, maybe some chemical imbalances that made me a little depressed. But, you know, so all these things are going on, and when all of your friends, you know, and at the time in the band, like, all those guys were my friends. They were my best friends. We lived in an RV on tour together. You know, we spent all this time together. When you spend all that time together, you start to wear on each other. And when everybody's having a really good time, and there's one guy who, like, just kind of wants to sleep all the time and you know, play shows and then go to sleep, and doesn't seem like he's having a good time, you know, as like 18-year-olds, you look at that guy and you probably say, like, well, that guy's a bummer. Let's get him out of here. And it wasn't that simple, and it wasn't that, like, quick. But over time, I could see how, you know, maybe it felt like I wasn't actively raining on a parade, but maybe it wasn't that fun to be around, you know? Now,
do you think that they kind of didn't get what was kind of going through your mind at the time? I mean, I know they were your best friends then, but, you know, if my best friend's mom was, you know, going through some stuff, yeah. What you would think you would have some sort of, you know, some sympathetic, you know, approaches, or, you know, just understanding kind of what somebody's going through. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And I think, you know, I think everybody has that to some degree, but you also have to remember, like, we're approaching, you and I right now in this discussion, we're approaching this as, you know, not
hindsight 2020.
Right. Well, we're dealing in hindsight, but we're also dealing in, like, you and I are, you know, we're both late 20s, I believe, and, like, we're adults now, and we can digest and think about these things in a way that people who are 18 years old don't do, you know? So, like, even though at the time I think we as a collective were very mature for our age, we still, you know, we were still 18. So, yeah, I mean, like, there's still parts of me that's like, man, I really wish somebody would have just came to me and been like, hey man, what's wrong? Like, I can see you're not happy. We're all really happy and you're not happy. Like, what's going on? So like, yeah, part of me wishes that they would have been more proactive on that, but then it's also partly my responsibility that like I was having such a hard time and I probably wasn't communicating it. I was probably trying to tough it out and try to act like, hey, nothing's wrong. Like, it's fine. We don't need to talk about it. I was probably trying to soldier through it, which, you know, is helpful sometimes, but as we all learn over time, if you try to carry that weight by yourself for too long, it doesn't ever end well. So, you know, I wish they would have done certain things differently. And I know that I could have been more open about what I was feeling, and maybe that would have changed things too.
And how were you dealing with it on the road? Because it's really tough. For those of you who do not know what touring's like, it's really tough. Like, especially if you have bad anxiety, and on top of that, you're going through this horrific tragedy, and you can't even stop it. You can't, you know, go home and visit, and you know what I mean? Like, you're not there. So how did you cope with all that? That's kind of amazing that like you didn't kill somebody on the road.
Yeah, it was honestly very miserable, and I haven't. It sucks because like I was saying, and you know, especially when I looked at it through the perspective of the other guys, like this is what we had been working towards. We were finally starting to feel like we were getting somewhere, and it's all this stuff that like everybody wants to be really happy about, and I just was miserable. And you know, to defend myself a little bit, I don't think there were very few occasions where I ever really lashed out at anybody over it, because that's one of the things I try to like pride myself on, is like, no matter how I feel, like I don't want to take it out on anybody. Like, you know, I might feel awful, but I don't want to be a jerk to anybody. So I mean, it happened from time to time. There were arguments, I'm sure, but like for the most part, I was pretty to myself about it. But just, you know, over time, like, and this is going to make me sound old. It makes me feel old to say this, but when we were doing our first tours, like not everybody had smartphones at that time. Like, you know, nowadays, if you go on a long road trip, you can just sit on your phone and like you have enough to keep you busy and keep your mind occupied. Like back then, I barely had a cell phone. You know what I mean? So like, there just wasn't a lot to do except to just think and like sit and stew and, you know, on these long drives where we would play, you know, we would play whatever show we played. We would get out of there and I would drive the RV from 1 a.m. to 6 a.m. by myself, and then like just sit there and just have nothing but these painful thoughts. And it was very not fun. And at the time, you know, obviously like with my mom, that was what was going on. That was the big thing. You know, I had a girlfriend at the time who like, and when you're young and you have a girlfriend and you miss them, like that compounds it a little bit. And it was really hard, man. It was not, and that's something that I tell people is, and I hate telling this, but if I'm being honest, I have to say it this way. I hated it. Like I hated touring at that time. Like when we would gear up to get ready to leave for a tour, all of my friends were like over the moon and excited. And I like had this giant pit in my stomach, like you wouldn't believe. Now I loved playing. Like I loved the shows. I loved being able to play in different cities every night. The 30 minutes or 40 minutes that we were playing every night, I loved every second of it. And I loved the parts of being at the show afterwards where like I was at the merch table and people were buying merch for me and I was talking to fans. I loved that part too. But that's, 3 hours out of a 24-hour day. And the rest of that day was intensely miserable for me, honestly.
Were you communicating with your mom a lot during this whole era?
Yeah, I mean, when we were home, I lived with her. And I was, 18. I lived in an apartment with my mom, and I, when I was on the road, like I would call her a good amount. And the first stretch of like touring and serious like traveling and stuff that we were doing, she was in remission, so it wasn't as like impendingly bad as it had been before that, and as it ended up being after that phase. But so there was a phase where things were like looking more rosy, but it was always in the back of my mind still, where it was like, if this is like her last year of being alive and I'm gone for half of it, then that really blows. But you're weighing that, it wasn't that simple. It wasn't just like, oh my God, I want to go home, screw this. It was like, these things are fighting in your head where it's like, this is what I've been working towards for 7 years of me playing this instrument and playing in this band, I can't just walk away from it. I can't. You're walking that line of fighting those two like feelings, and then all the other stuff, like you said, it's hard enough to begin with. Where it's like, nowadays it would be a little better with better GPS systems and smartphones, but back then if you weren't drinking and if you weren't like, and I would drink a little bit, but I wasn't doing any kind of drugs. If you're not doing that stuff, like, it's not very fun, to be honest, outside of the playing aspect.
Now let's talk about some happy times, like you and your mom. Do you remember her like going to any of your shows, or remembering her, like hearing your record for the first time, and kind of what was her response to all of this?
Yeah, she was always a really good-hearted and generous person. Nobody's parents or nobody's anything is ever perfect, but she was a very selfless individual, and really in a way, like, the things that made her happy were very simple, and really all she cared about at that point was, like, she just really, like, my siblings are all a lot older than me, so they have some kids and stuff, and at that time they had kids, obviously, and all she really cared about was, like, watching her grandkids, and then, like, stuff that was going on with me to get excited about. Like, that was her whole life, was just, like, hearing about the things I had to talk about and what was going on. And she was very supportive in that sense, and very, like, I think she was really proud of what we were doing. I remember, for our album release show for Generation Y, which would have been August of 2011, our big show that we headlined at Reggie's Rock Club in Chicago, we had us play. We had a bunch of people, bands come out and open for us, and it was like our crowd. And
you did a music video, right? Wasn't this the show with the music video that you did for? The
Mountains, yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, so we recorded that. That was the thing, and that was right in the middle of the first week of the Kitty tour. So we were doing the Kitty tour, but we went off of it for a date to do our album release show at Reggie's. And so we played in, like, man, if I had to guess, it was like St. Louis-ish area. It was Sauget, Illinois, which is by St. Louis. And we had to drive all the way home overnight and then get to Reggie's super early to shoot the music video footage, and then hang out for a couple hours until the show started, and then play this headlining show. But the point that I was getting at with the show was I had to make sure to reserve a certain area for my family and for, like, my mom to be able to watch the show somewhere comfortably, because she was very, very sick and weak at the time. So, that was a good memory, was, knowing that she was able to see that show, which up to that point was our biggest achievement, really. So, and I think it was really cool for her to be there and obviously watch us play, but then also just to see all of the support that we were getting from all of the fans that we had. I would imagine, as a parent, seeing people cheer for your son like that would be a really good thing. So I always am very happy to think about the fact that she was able to be at that one.
And what was, not to get all sentimental, but what was, like, kind of the one thing you took away from just knowing your mom? Like, what is the one thing that, I guess, after her passing, and my sincere condolences to you guys and the family for this, but what was the one thing you kind of took from her, kind of thing? You know what I mean? Like, in like
totally. It's a great question, and that's something that I found myself kind of dwelling on recently, and I struggled to put it into words for a long time. What it turned out to be that, like, she taught me more than anything is that, I would remember when she was really sick, and it was bad, and I was the one, kind of helping her through it as best as I could, and taking care of her when I was home. It was really bad, and it was really difficult, and I can only imagine the amount she was suffering. But even through all of that, she was extremely generous, extremely like caring and sympathetic to other stuff. Like when you're living with someone who's dying of cancer, and it's like, it's pretty clear that they're not gonna be around long term. It's really hard to feel okay about complaining about anything. Like, damn, Mom, I know you're in intense agony, but like our band rehearsal today really, really sucked. Like it was really rough. It's hard to have those conversations with someone in that situation, but she was so kind and so good that like, even though she was having the hardest of times, she was still good and fair to me, and would still listen to my problems, and would still ask how I was doing, and would still try to do nice things for me, even though she was, in that state. And that's something I try to apply to my life, where, I've never had cancer. I've never been terminally ill, but, if I struggle with, some feelings of anxiety or feelings of depression or whatever it may be, if I'm having a hard time, I really try to not let that affect how I treat anyone else. Because if she could do that, dealing with what she was dealing with, then I can absolutely be that way. And that's, I would say, the number one thing that I would attribute to the way she raised me.
And do you think that her passing kind of helped your anxiety and kind of helped you kind of move on to like the bigger things in life? You know what I mean? Because your anxiety level and how you have the tools to cope with it changes through the years. So was this a primarily, was this a prime example of how a prime tool that you learned how to deal with your specific anxiety?
Yeah, I would say, any kind of adversity like that, like adversity builds character, right? Ideally. It's not always like that. Some people never recover from traumatic things, but for me, I try to build off of like, of that mindset, and, try to learn how to handle things more maturely and more calmly. And in some ways, yeah, it has helped. It has helped certain things. Now, the unfortunate thing that happened along with that already very unfortunate situation is that I had some not so good months after she died as well. So it took a very long time for me to like, I think I always handled it pretty well, but it took a long time for it to kind of come more full circle and for me to be able to reap the benefit of it.
So see, I don't want to get into like the negative aspects, but
well, it's all germane to the story of what we're trying to get at. So I don't mind talking about it, honestly.
I'm just kind of curious how you dealt with the coming months after her passing, and how do you even prepare for something like this? I don't think you can.
Yeah, that's the thing, is I was so young, and I had so little. Like I had no money. Even like being in the band, like that was great, but we weren't really making any money. So, all right. I mean, I'll tell the story. I want to preface it by saying, like, I'm not trying to reignite any hard feelings that may have existed or whatever. Like, everybody's cool now for the most part. Like, there's nothing. I'm gonna say some things that a lot of people won't know, but I'm not trying to make anybody look less than good here. So she was in remission for a long time, and then in beginning of May of that year, we were on tour with Overkill, which was, our biggest tour to date, and was our biggest thing to date. And it was a great tour. And like, Overkill was so awesome. God Forbid and Sudakra were so awesome and so cool to us. And it really felt like we were like on an upward trajectory, and things were going good. And my mom was in remission, and like, I was still depressed, but I was like, okay, like, let's keep going. Let's keep it moving. And so I get a call. I think we were in LA. We were in California. You and I were talking before we were doing the interview about the Overkill show in LA, which was Club Nokia is what it was called. I don't know if it was that day or if it was the day before that show. So when she called me and said that it was, she was no longer in remission and that things were not good. So I was immediately flung into a scenario where we're in the midst of this thing for my potential career that is like a really big deal, and has a lot of good forward momentum, but my mom's probably only going to be alive for another month. So what do I do? We have, we still have another week of this tour left. I was in a tough spot. And for me, my fight or flight kicked in, and it became, a binary choice of like, am I just going to do it? Am I just going to stay and finish this and then go home? Or are we all going to go home? And when I told everybody what was going on after I got off the phone, I was like, okay, well, like, we need to go home. I didn't think of any other options. I didn't think of anyone filling in for me. Like, I didn't think of any of that. I was just like, I don't think you guys are going to have someone fill in for me, and I got to go. So, sorry, I don't know what else to say. And the response that I got from everyone from that was less than warm. Not anyone being purposefully like bad or like mean, but just not the
understanding.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody was understanding, but when you're in that moment, and it was a really bad moment for me. Like, you kind of want your friends to like soften it. You know what I mean? Like, make it easier, or like, not that they can fix anything, but like, you definitely don't want them to make it any more complicated, right?
Right.
And that's just not what I felt coming from them. It was not the response that I was hoping for. And it didn't feel good. Like, it was a bad thing that happened, and it felt worse after that. We were sitting in we stayed overnight in our RV at a Walmart, and there was a Subway in the Walmart, and we were all sitting around at Subway eating, and I was telling them what was going on, and it was hard, man. And it was just, the looks, like, I could tell they sympathized. I could tell, like, Jim, my mom was essentially his stepmom for a long time. Like, our parents were not together anymore at that point, but we grew up in the same house. My mom was a big part in raising him. So, like, on some level, he was sad for that stuff as well. And, I could tell they were all feeling for me on some level, but instead of what I was hoping for, which was like, hey, do whatever you got to do and don't worry about it. Like, we're with you. It's good. I just got a lot of like silence and blank stares and like, well, we don't have to go home. You can go home. That was, to me, maybe up to that point, there had been growing problems since I was, noticeably unhappy, and they probably didn't like that already. But for me, that was a turning point where after that point, we were never
the same,
as close. It was hard because, I had to go home, and they finished the tour, and I called them every day, and I tried to be cool and good about it. And they made it. And then, when they got back, everything was cool. We were good. We were kind of rehearsing and working on like potential second album stuff, like trying to write new stuff. And as it turned out, like, I feel like I made the right decision. I left the tour with a week left, and my mom died a month later. So, when you have what turned out to be 4 weeks left of a parent being alive, if I would have just stayed the course, I would have lost 25% of that. And honestly, the last 2 weeks of it, she was not herself anyway. So as far as like weeks of my mom, like being
your
like,
mom,
yeah, being herself and like being aware and being able to have a conversation with me, like, I got an extra week out of what would have been like 2 or 3 weeks tops. And like, so I made the right decision ultimately, but, it was tough, man. That was a really tough point. And I think I've talked a lot, and I forget your original question, but,
no.
About the months leading after that, that was the starting point of, she died in early June. So that was a month after I left the tour. And, right before she died, I got mononucleosis. So I was really sick. And for like 4 or 5 weeks after she died, I couldn't be around anybody. So all I was doing was being sick in my sister's basement after my mom died, and all my friends had finished this tour without me, and they were all out enjoying their summer, like doing stuff together and being friends, and I couldn't be with them. And I was already mad at them to begin with. It was really bad. It was a really like, it almost sounds made up. It almost sounds like a movie script where it's like, oh, this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens. But it all kind of unfolded in that unfortunate timing, and it made things difficult.
When did you start to pick up the bass again? Because And like I said, how did you cope with this? This is a lot of a lot of emotions flying and a lot of, you know, how did you cope with all that?
I didn't cope with it very well. Like I said, I think I did well to not ever take it out on anybody too badly. And there was a couple times where that was not the case, and I got into arguments with people. But mostly I was sitting, after my mom died, I lived with her, so I had to move somewhere else. I was 19 years old. I moved into my sister's basement. She had a house and she's got a family. She was pregnant and she had her daughter, 10 days before my mom died. So like, that's all going on. My sister's like about to burst. My mom's about to die. I have mono and I'm living in a basement now. And like, my friends don't seem to like me anymore. I didn't cope with it well. Like, and what is there when you're that young and you feel like you're losing everything all at once? What is there to do? Like the only things you could do to cope with it are bad things. Like you could drink yourself into oblivion. You could do hard drugs. You could start to treat the people around you badly. I don't think I never really did any of that. So like, but not to pat myself in the back, but the thing that I did do was I got immensely depressed and like withdrawn, and it was not a good place to be. It was really rough.
Did you have any like activities though that new activities that you started to enjoy a little bit more though to pass the time? Was there any of that, or was there just this sitting around kind of sulking a bit?
Yeah, at that time, not really. No, I mean, like I said, for the first chunk of it, I was sick and I couldn't go anywhere. So it was just, I had a girlfriend, and she was supportive and she was helpful at the time. But I was just kind of sitting around, and I had to, obviously I wasn't living with my mom anymore, so I had to like get some kind of job. I got like a job at a local restaurant, just like that was like my first real job ever, and just to make a little bit of cash. And so I was busy doing that. So then there was times where it's like they wanted to rehearse, I couldn't. Like, hey, you know what? I can't. I got to work tonight. Like, can we do it another day? And that just, things like that kept happening. And like I said, this divide had already begun. And now every time, like, I didn't want to have a rehearsal, or I wasn't feeling like doing this, or I didn't feel good enough to do that, it was just another thing on their list of what eventually led to, them replacing me.
And I always hated the way they kind of let you go. You know what I mean? I always hated how and I think they made a post or something like that. And at the time, I was like, they could have been handled a little bit better. Do you know what I mean? Am I speaking out of terms? Hopefully, I'm not. But I believe
you're not wrong. Yeah, that was a point of contention for a while. Let me just say too that like I wanted to make clear, like we've more or less all been cool and made amends. Like Jim and Conrad have kept in touch pretty well, and I didn't talk to either of them for a few years, but we've all kind of hashed it out to some degree, not fully, and I'm there might need to be more of that done down the line, but everything is civil and everything's mostly cool now. But at the time I was heartbroken by it. I was devastated by the way it happened, where obviously there's the backdrop of everything else that was going on. Even with all of that, like, I was pretty much of the mindset that like I knew things weren't right and I knew something had to change. In the band, I had kind of always been the guy who would get in the middle of, like, if there was a problem. Like if Jim had a problem with Conrad, I thought I was pretty good about diffusing things. I would talk to him and I would work it out. I would cool him off, or vice versa. If it was Conrad having a problem with Jim or whatever, I always thought I was kind of like the peacemaker there. And so I was thinking, like, hey, I can tell these guys are like kind of bothered by me right now. But if it ever got bad enough to where like something was going to happen, like I trust that these are my best friends and that we will have a conversation about it before like anything gets out of hand. So like, even though I knew something was wrong, I wasn't worried. So, this is, I leave the tour beginning of May. My mom, passed away beginning of June. I was sidelined for a few more weeks after that with mono. And the rest of that summer, we were kind of like working on new stuff that was eventually going to be on the second album. And, that divide continued to grow a little bit. And then Yeah, and then it kind of came out of nowhere. It would have been early September, so this was, 4 months after my mom had died, and this is a couple months of a little bit of tension. And I walked in one day and I was replaced.
Walked in one day. And what do you mean walked into the rehearsal space and what? Somebody else was there, kind of thing?
No. This is worth talking about because I think it matters to the story. So that's they had to go elsewhere and audition someone. The guy who replaced me, who by the way was a very talented guy, and like maybe the second album maybe he wasn't a good fit for that band, but he's a very talented guy. So I always want to make sure I say that because none of it has anything to do with him, and none of it is that guy's fault. They, I had begun working my restaurant job and having other obligations, and they told me they were going on a trip, and they invited me on said trip, and I told them I couldn't go because I had work, and I think they knew that when they invited me that I would be saying no.
Gotcha. So they needed an excuse. That it sounds like they needed some sort of excuse to say if this is not working out, kind of thing.
Well, yeah, it wasn't like a trip to like go play a show. Like it wasn't like the band had a gig that I didn't go to. It was like they wanted to go somewhere as like friends and hang out somewhere, and I was like, I can't. And I was in touch with them that whole weekend, and we had planned. It was a weekend getaway, and I was talking to them, and I'm like, hey, how's it going? You guys having fun? Blah blah blah. And we had planned on rehearsing that Tuesday. So, I was excited. Like I had worked all weekend and my friends were gone, and I was excited because like I wanted to hang out with them and, see how their time was. And, the night before I get a text and I assume it was Conrad. Like, hey, change plans. We're not going to like have a regular practice tomorrow. We're going to go and we're going to go to Frank's office and we're going to have a meeting with Frank and talk about like, our next moves and stuff and blah, blah, blah. And so, okay, sure. Like whenever we had meetings with Frank, that was always a really good thing because that always meant like something new was coming up and we were formulating, our plan. So I was actually excited about that because I always look forward to stuff like that.
And it was you three? It was you three or this was the four-piece? So
Mario was in the band still, but he was he lived in Florida, so he wasn't in town. He was in Miami.
Gotcha.
It was just going to be. It was originally supposed to be us. I don't know. It's hard to explain, but Mario, when he was in town, he lived at Conrad's parents' house with him. So if he was in town for like 3 months, he would be staying there, and then sometimes he would go home and be gone for a couple months, whatever it was. So it was just Jim and Conrad, and then me. We were going to go meet with Frank or whatever it was. Actually, I guess now that I'm talking it out, I was expecting Mario to be there for rehearsal because he had gone on this trip with them. You know what I mean? Like they had all been hanging out. I was expecting him to be there, but it turns out he was still in Miami because they did not go where they told me they were going. They instead went to Miami to audition my replacement.
Gotcha.
And when I got to Conrad's house, we were supposed to get in the car together and go meet with our manager. Mario wasn't there. He was still in Miami because they were all in Miami. And Jim and Conrad were just sitting there, and they told me I wasn't in the band anymore.
Any particular reason, or it was just you're not in the band? That's it, kind of thing.
Well, I mean, from their perspective, I'm sure there's plenty of things they could say at the time. Like, I was far from perfect. And as we discussed in like the more musical parts of what we were talking about earlier, I was always a work in progress. Like I started later than everybody on both playing and singing, and I was always kind of the weak link in that sense. Not that I wasn't getting good or I wasn't making progress, but when the perception of the band is that like, wow, this drummer's great, like this guitar player's great, and like all the instrumentation's really good, but the singer, man, like he's just not up to par with the rest of it. And I wouldn't even disagree with that, but that was the perception. And on top of it, I was probably a bit of a bummer to be around. If I was perfect, like I would have never been fired. So of course, like however you want to dole out the blame, like, for me, I was always really hurt by it. And I don't think it was the right decision, but like, that doesn't mean that there weren't like legitimate grievances on their end of like I was describing earlier, they were all having the time of their life and I wasn't. So of course that would make you look at the situation and assess it that way.
I get it. I do. I will go back though and say Yeah, they wanted like I don't quote unquote better singer. To me, I don't even think they got that. No offense. I've been very vocal on the second record, and just it doesn't do anything for me. Vocally speaking, it's just it's a step down for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people didn't really like that album either. So it's, and when I say a lot of people, I mean like the people who were our fans. Like, you know, maybe new people came to like the band because of the album, but the people who I knew who had been following the band since we were very young did not respond positively to that either. So, yeah, I mean, like, you know, that guy, like he could do things that at the time I just could not do. So like he could sing more classically. He could, you know, he was a more well-trained musician. He had studied music. So he had a lot of things that at the time I had absolutely zero capacity for. But the problem is, you know, they thought that's what they needed to take the next step. But the problem is that in pursuing that, they replaced me, you know, and my strengths were live performance and like energy and like the frontman stuff. Like I was always pretty good at that. Once I got over like the anxiety of being the frontman, that was a strong suit of our show, and it was something that people walked away from and were happy about. And they replaced that with someone who had never, I don't think, had ever been in a metal band before, first of all, and who had never fronted a band before.
Oh, okay.
So
I didn't know any of this. All I got from it, because I saw Diamond Plate, you know, and the next time they came around with the specific lineup, didn't like the album at all. But at least I was, you know, going to go out and support and see what, you know, what they're up to, and because I was friends with all you guys, obviously around this time and going forward,
right.
But. Yeah, it didn't do anything. They were playing like a blues jam kind of thing, and I'm like, I'm not real. This isn't the Diamond Plate that I remember. Like, this isn't the fucking blistering attack. Because I loved, like I said, I loved the aura of your performance specifically, and your vocal style, and it just wasn't there anymore. And it just felt like phoned in, I guess is the word for. And I'm not trying to be super harsh. I'm just trying to be truthful here. It didn't do anything for me. I walked away from that show going, man, this is hopefully they get something better.
Well, and I think there was a good chunk of people who felt the same way. And like I said, like that's speaking nothing bad about Matt, who replaced me. He's
a phenomenal bass player. Phenomenal bass player.
Just
his vocals.
Not the fit, you know, and not like they thought it was the right fit because personality-wise at that time he meshed better than I was meshing at that point. But they underestimated, you know, I think they had convinced themselves that I was less valuable than I actually was.
Right.
And yeah, it's hard. I mean, like it's a different skill set. Like obviously that guy then probably knew more about music than I even know to this day, as you know, like 10 years later. But like what that band was and what people were expecting was one thing, and they made the hardest left turn imaginable. And even if it turned out like even if what they turned out was like objectively just really good, like even if you don't like the style, like, and it was, but if it had objectively been amazing, it was such a departure from what people were expecting that it wouldn't have mattered how good it was, because it was too different, and it was too far removed from what people's expectations were. And that's kind of what happened. Like the band that they kind of turned themselves towards being, like, I'm sure there's a setting where that's like a good band and people like it. But if you drop that band with the name Diamond Plate and put it at like a Thrasho DeMaio show, everybody's going to hate it, you know, like that's just the reality of what it was. Yeah, it's hard. And it was upsetting to me. Like there was part of me where there was a no-win scenario after I wasn't in the band anymore. It was like, well, okay, either they're going to fucking blow up now and because I'm not in the band anymore, I'm going to feel like I was the thing holding it back, or they're going to fail and crumble and all of this work I had put in is wiped away because the band is no more. So it was kind of a tough spot to be in.
I mean, yeah, you were kind of the glue, in my opinion, and without that glue, everything falls apart. I feel bad already with what I had just mentioned, but it's the truth. I just got to be honest here. It just didn't. That whole era didn't do anything for me. Now, when you were, I guess, looking around specifically this whole 2013 2014 era for you, what were you doing? Were you still playing music with other bands, and how did you get into your next project?
So for that time, I was such a miserable pile of, like, I don't want to knock myself down too much. I was having a hard time. So I had a really hard time getting excited about playing music again because, like, I thought personally that I was good enough to jump into something like established already. I didn't really have the desire or like the stomach to start something over again from the ground up. So I was just always kind of like probing around. Like I thought I would get more opportunities than I did. And the reason for that, what I think is, like I said, I was not the best version of myself when I was around all of these other bands on tour. Like, I think I got along with everybody and everybody liked me, but I wasn't happy. And, so I wasn't as good at the networking and like the making friends part of and that's a big part of the game, going on tour and just like being bros with everybody. And I was cool with everybody, but I didn't make the connections that I should have been trying to make because I wasn't thinking like that. And my mind was elsewhere. So, after the fact, it was kind of disheartening that like I didn't get a lot of offers. I got some people reach out who, wanted me to do a few things, and some of it was cool, but it was never really a match. I had my aims set pretty high that like I wasn't going to join anything established unless it was like really awesome, like a certain level of quality and like a known band. Like that's what I was hoping to try to do. And it just never really materialized. There was a couple of things, like I said, a couple of offers that were worth thinking about, but nothing that was worth like moving to another state for or displacing myself for. I came close a couple times, but ultimately I was just trying to be patient and not make any big life decisions from a place of like being desperate and depressed.
Right.
So actually in that time, like I kept my eyes open and I kept my ear to the ground, but I went through a period of time where I barely touched a bass for probably like 2 years, like barely touched it. Like the only time I would play is if something came along and I had to like learn some songs to maybe audition for something. Other than that, I was not like practicing daily like I grew up doing.
Now, what kind of changed that for you, though?
Well, after a couple of years, so, I had just turned 20 when I was fired from Diamond Plate. And a couple of years later, I had just been monitoring sort of what had been going around Chicago and stuff. And I just started thinking about like, okay, I need to make money, and playing in a rock or a metal band, like you don't make money, like, especially at first. So how am I going to like keep doing this and make money? So I just started keeping my ear to the ground on like local bands in the Chicago area who were like tribute acts or like cover bands who were making money, because I saw like the crowds they were playing, which, as I've said throughout this whole time, is like my favorite part about playing music is like the live performance part. That's what I was always most excited about and what I was always best at. So, I was looking at these bands who were playing in front of big crowds consistently and like not having to go on tour for 9 months to do it and making money doing it. And I'm like, well, if I could ever join something like that and have that as like a thing on my resume and a notch in my belt, like that would be a great thing to do. And it just so happened that I got the job with Hairbangers Ball, which is the band that I play in now, the job that I have now. And I've been doing it for about 4 years. It was just, it was a lot of luck that I was able to like jump on the opportunity and make the most of it when I did. But also, I never stopped like paying attention and trying, even though I wasn't practicing as much. I didn't ever kind of like stop moving my feet entirely, like, because once you give up, it's really hard to gain the momentum. Like you have to keep a little bit of forward like velocity.
Totally. And with Bangers Ball or whatever. What do you get differently as opposed to just being in like an original style band? Because this is more of a cover project. What do you get that's different?
Well, the paycheck is one, but that's not the end all be all for everyone, obviously, and it isn't for me either. But for someone like me who really likes to play live, like this is a band that plays 150 shows a year, and most of those shows are for large audiences. When you look at it from just like a long-term standpoint, if you're a musician coming up, when I was younger, all anyone wanted to do was you write your own music, and then you get signed, and then you're good. We've all learned like that was never really how it worked, and especially nowadays, like people don't buy music anymore, so there's a lot of money that is not what it used to be. So it has kind of shifted the paradigm to where I think the smartest thing someone can do is find something in music that you like, that you enjoy doing, that is a consistent paycheck that you can use to develop your skills and become more polished at what you do while making a living, and also while being able to perform it in front of the most people possible.
And let me butt in real quick. Connections, dude. All about connections, like you said. So you're probably making some connections with original style bands or great musicians that you can hopefully start a project with later on, right?
Absolutely, yeah. That's always a thing that's there, and it's like you can, and also doing that in front of a lot of people. I could have sat here and been like, oh, playing covers, that's lame. Like I don't want to do that. And I think a lot of people have that mindset. But once you do it, and once you're in it, and once you have to learn all this material, and it's music that I didn't grow up really listening to that much. Like I love like Van Halen and stuff like that. Like I always liked that stuff, but I didn't grow up listening to a lot of Def Leppard or Motley Crue and stuff like that. And once you have to learn all this material, and you really start to dive into the nuances of it, you learn to like it, and you learn to appreciate it in a way that you didn't before. And this is all just knowledge and experience that I wouldn't otherwise be getting, So and on top of it, it's my job. So it's like I could do this, or I could go work some other job that I would hate, So why wouldn't I do something like this?
I love it, man. Well, tell me a little bit about what you got coming up for it, and thank you so much again for giving me, a couple hours of your time to tell your journey, man. It means so much to me. You have no idea. I've been just a huge fan of yours, and especially the Generation Y period and Relativity from Diamond Plate for a lot of number of years. But tell me what you got coming up for Hairbangers Ball.
Appreciate it, man. I appreciate you having me on again. Totally. So Hairbangers, we're based out of Chicago. Obviously, we play mostly in the Midwest. We play like 150 shows a year, so we're very busy. We do a lot of clubs. We do all the festivals in the summer. It's a busy schedule. Obviously, things in the world lately have complicated that, but we're hoping that we can get back into some sort of schedule here soon. So if anyone listening lives in the Midwest, we play all over the Midwest pretty consistently. And as far as the immediate future, we have a live stream show. So no live audience, just a live stream direct to the internet. At the Whiskey A Go-Go on June 27th. So that's coming up pretty quick. And that's what we're preparing for right now. If anybody out there is interested, if you like, like I said, if you like Motley Crue, if you like Def Leppard, I get to sing. I'm not the lead singer of the band, but I do get to sing a couple songs in this set. I think the people who listen to this might be interested to know I sing an Iron Maiden song, so that's pretty cool. We're going to be playing at the Whiskey for this live stream show. It's, like I said, June 27th. If you want to buy tickets, it's $10. It's hairbangersball.veeps, VEEPS.com. If you want to keep up to date on it, it's 7:00 Pacific time on the 27th, 9 Central time. And any information anybody wants to see about future Hairbangers Ball shows, or to, if you want to look into buying tickets for this specific event on the 27th, you can go to hairbangersball.com and click on the news section. And we're doing our best to keep everybody up to date on our plans. Obviously, all businesses and all musicians are kind of in a holding pattern. But if you want to keep up to date with us, hairbangersball.com, at hairbangersball on all the social media stuff. and hopefully we'll be back up and busy again very soon.
Absolutely. Well, one more question for you before I let you go.
Sure.
Or actually, two. This is a two-parter. Do you miss playing in an original band? Will there ever be a Diamond Plate reunion with you singing? Or will there ever be an original project with you singing in it in general again?
Yeah, that's all. Those are all very good questions. I think what I miss about original music is there's a certain level of, a certain level of pride that you can take in it when it does well, when it's something you've created. Obviously, that you don't get as much when you play a song that you didn't write. But so there's that, and I think as far as me doing something like that in the future, I think there's a possibility for it if the right circumstances present themselves. If I meet someone who I really work well with or have a good vibe with and want to look into that, I definitely think that could be a thing. I definitely have thoughts and ideas that could be put into a band. But I wouldn't want to do it unless I knew it was like something that I believed in. Like I don't want to do it just to do it because frankly, I don't have the time for that unless it's going to be worth the time. As far as a Diamond Plate reunion, it's been talked about. It's tough. It's hard to say definitively what could happen because we've all kind of gone our separate ways for the most part, and we tried. I would say it was close to happening at one point, and as far as I'm concerned, if it came as close as it did a couple of years ago, it could come that close again, and it could actually work out. So I wouldn't rule it out. And I will say this: if they ever wanted to do a reunion show or whatever of any sort, that it would have to involve me, most likely. So if Diamond Plate ever plays another show, it would most likely be with me as well.
Absolutely. And I wonder if it's going to be a 3 or a 4 piece. Huh? Now, that'd be an interesting
good
thing.
Question. Yeah, I think if I had to just give my opinion, I think people would just want it to be us 3. Honestly, obviously they went back to 3 after I was removed, and after Mario was gone, they went back to just 3. So it always kind of ended up as a 3-piece. So I think that's most likely what it would be. But who knows if the right ingredients pop into place, I wouldn't say it's impossible, but it would have to take a lot of things happening a certain way.
Totally. Well, real quick before I let you go, give me the links again and tell our listeners about the Whiskey A Go-Go show one more time.
Sure, you got it. So the name of the band is Hairbangers Ball. We play all of the, like the top, like the rock and metal hits from the 80s. So we do, Def Leppard, Bon Jovi, Motley Crue. We do some like Judas Priest stuff. We do, like I said, I sing on an Iron Maiden song. We try to cover the full gamut of like the 80s hair metal and hair rock and stuff like that. So if anybody, like I said, moving forward for any shows, once the shows start happening again, it's hairbangersball.com. You can find all the information there, at Hairbangersball on all of the social media. The live stream show from the Whiskey A Go-Go, so that's obviously a big deal because that's where all of these bands came up and made their name. All the bands that our whole business model is based off of these bands. So this is a big deal for us to be playing there. It's kind of an iconic moment for Hairbangers Ball, which has been around for almost 20 years at this point. So it's a really special day for us. It's a live stream event, so there's no audience. You go to hairbangersball.veeps.com. Veeps is the name of the production company that is putting this event together. It's $10, and once you pay for that, you get a link. And if you click on the link, you get access to the live stream show, and you can watch it from your smart TV or your computer. And we hope that anyone listening who likes rock and who likes Iron Maiden or whatever is going to be tuning in for that.
But yeah, anyway, my man, thank you very much for coming on the show. I really appreciate everything. And it's great to talk to you again. Great to hear from you. Another episode of Poppitt's Corner. I'm out of here, guys. Cheers.